I had been a bus driver for local schools for nearly 20 years before retiring and starting to drive city buses. While I loved driving kids around, as I grew older, I found it harder to keep up with their energy and chaos. Driving in the city was more stressful, but the bus lot was a mere 10-minute walk from my apartment, and the passengers mostly kept to themselves, which I preferred. At the city bus company, we had buses running around the clock. Not many drivers wanted the night shifts, so us day drivers were required to cover 2 night shifts every other week. These weren't too bad, except they threw off my sleep schedule. The roads were emptier and there were fewer passengers, making the job more relaxing compared to the daytime hustle. It was around 2 to 3 a.m. on a snowy December night, and the city was quiet. I had been driving my usual route for about an hour without a single passenger. Only a few people were out walking in the snow. I pulled up to the last stop of my route for a quick break, leaning back in my seat to rest my eyes, careful not to fall asleep. Suddenly, a loud knock at the door jolted me awake. An older man was standing outside, looking in. I nervously smiled and opened the door. He scanned his bus pass and sat at the very back of the bus. I called out to him, offering to drop him off wherever he needed, but there was no response. I found it odd, but decided to keep driving, stopping at every bus stop along the route as usual. Throughout the drive, I kept glancing in the rearview mirror. The man just sat there, staring straight ahead. His behavior was strange, but at that hour, who knows what goes through people's minds? As I neared the last 2 stops, I wondered when he would get off. At the next stop, I looked back at him. After a brief pause, he got up, his gaze fixed on the floor. As he walked closer, I turned around, noticing his face was filled with anger and rage. I tried to act normally, but he stopped right next to me, staring down at me with an intense look. I nervously asked if everything was okay. He just stared, then walked back to his seat. I was genuinely scared now, sensing something was very wrong. I drove to the final stop, feeling a tension I couldn't quite describe. The man suddenly got up, quickly walked down the aisle, and shoved me against the window, pressing a gun against my head. His eyes were full of crazed anger. I couldn't understand his intentions, but I feared he would shoot. Without a word, he just screamed loudly in my face, then let go and walked out. I quickly closed the door and drove away, calling the police immediately. They tracked the bus pass he used, but the photo they showed me days later was of a completely different person. I couldn't fathom what was going through that man's mind or what he wanted from me. That encounter, on a quiet, snowy night, was the most disturbing and unsettling experience I'd ever had. It left me shaken, forever altering my perception of the night shifts and the unpredictability of the people you might encounter. I had been working the overnight shift at a fast food restaurant as the drive-through attendant for almost 3 years. I was a part-time college student with odd class hours, so these night shifts from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. made my life a lot easier. The job was generally slow, often dull, with a few customers trickling in at night. However, there were nights when strange things happened, particularly when I was alone. My regular co-worker, who usually shared these overnight shifts with me, was off for a vacation week. That left me solo for 3 nights out of my 5-night work week. The first 2 nights went by without any issues. They were typical, slow and manageable. But the 3rd night was different. That night, there was a snowstorm outside, with only a handful of customers showing up for small orders. Then, around 2 a.m., there was a long period of quiet. No one came through the drive-thru for almost 45 minutes. During this lull, I kept my headset on in case any late-night customers arrived and started cleaning to pass the time. While cleaning, I noticed bright headlights through the front window. A car was parked right outside the doors. Our dining room closed at 9 p.m., so it was a bit unusual to see someone parked there. I thought maybe the driver was checking their phone or needed a quick stop. I continued cleaning, not giving it much thought. A few minutes later, my headset beeped. A customer was in the drive-thru. I quickly went to the window, where a man's soft voice asked for a large soda. He pulled up to the window faster than expected, and I could see him glancing into the restaurant as I prepared his drink. It felt awkward, but I handed him the soda, took his exact change, and wished him a good night. After he drove off, I went back to cleaning. However, when I passed by the window a few minutes later, I was startled to see the same man still parked there, staring into the restaurant. I asked if he needed anything else, but he just said no and eventually drove away. It was unsettling, but I reminded myself that the restaurant was locked and secure. I resumed cleaning, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling. Soon there was another beep in the headset, but no one responded when I asked what they wanted. I checked the cameras and saw the same car behind the drive-thru window, the man still inside. Feeling nervous, I stepped away from the window, out of sight but keeping an eye on the camera feed. After a minute of staring at the screen, the man suddenly pulled up to the window and started banging on it aggressively. Shocked, I backed away, watching as he then sped off to park in front of the main doors. He tried to force the locked front doors open. In a panic, I called 911, reporting the situation as the man struggled with the door. He gave up after a few attempts and drove off. The police arrived shortly after, ensuring I was safe and promising to investigate using the security footage. The rest of my shift passed in a blur of anxiety. I kept wondering about the man's intentions. Was he planning to rob the place, or was it something else? Being alone made me feel vulnerable, and I couldn't help but think about what could have happened if he had managed to get in. After that night, I was left with a lingering sense of fear during my shifts. The incident made me realize how exposed I was working alone at night. I wasn't sure if the man was caught, as I never received an update from the police. I used to work night shifts at a small convenience store in Michigan. The job was simple: stock shelves, handle the occasional customer, and keep the place tidy. It was a slow job, especially during winter nights when the snow piled high and the streets were mostly deserted. One such winter night, I was all alone in the store. It was past midnight, and the snowfall had turned into a blizzard. The whole town seemed asleep, the only sounds being the howling wind and the faint hum of the store's heaters. Around 1 a.m., while I was restocking some shelves, I heard the bell above the door ring. Expecting a late-night customer, I walked to the counter, but there was nobody there. I figured the wind might have blown the door open, so I went to check and found it securely closed. Shrugging it off, I went back to my work. A little while later, I heard a noise from the back of the store, like something had fallen. I got a bit startled, but I figured it was just a product that had toppled off a shelf. I walked to the back, but everything seemed in place. I had a look around, but I couldn't figure out what caused the sound. Feeling a bit uneasy, I returned to the counter, trying to shake off the feeling. The store was silent again, except for the storm outside. I started to feel really isolated and kind of anxious. As I was finishing up on the aisle, I suddenly heard footsteps. They were faint, coming from the back of the store. I got really freaked out, but I stayed silent, listening. I walked slightly toward the back and called out, "Hello, is someone there?" But there was no response, just silence, followed by more footsteps. I cautiously made my way towards the back. The store felt different, like I wasn't alone. I checked each aisle, but I found nothing. I thought I might be imagining things, the silence and isolation getting to me. As I turned back towards the front, the temperature seemed to drop suddenly. I could see my breath in the air. I quickened my pace, wanting nothing more than to be back at the well-lit counter. That's when I heard a loud bang from the storeroom. My heart was racing now. I knew I had to check it out, but every part of me wanted to just run out of there. I picked up my phone and turned on the torch. I approached the storeroom door. I pushed it open slowly, the beam from my phone cutting through the darkness. The room was a mess, boxes overturned, products scattered. And then, in the corner of the room, I saw footprints in the snow on the floor. They were leading to a small window at the back, which I then realized was slightly open, letting in the cold winter air and a whole bunch of snow from the blizzard. I understood then that someone had been in the store, hiding, walking around while I was stocking shelves. The thought sent chills down my spine. I quickly closed the window, locked the storeroom, and rushed back to the front. I locked the front door too, and called the police. The police arrived within minutes, but after searching the area, they found no one. They said it was probably just a homeless person seeking shelter from the storm, but that didn't make me feel any better. The rest of the night I stayed at the counter, too scared to move. Since that night, I've never felt comfortable working the night shift alone. Every little sound makes me anxious. I keep thinking about the footprints, the open window, and what could have happened. It was just an ordinary winter night at work, but it turned into something straight out of a horror story.